Hi friends, welcome to Boil and Row Arts. I'm Leslie and today we're continuing our Never-Ending Story diorama series. Today I'm going to be working on Morla the Ancient One. She's portrayed as a turtle-like being in the movie. This project was really fun to make because as a child I love making turtles, especially at the beach. Building a turtle in the sand was so much fun to do. So this one was extra fun because I got to make a turtle and then add the little fantasy element to her. So let's get started. Today we are making Morla. She's going to go in the Never-Ending Story diorama series I'm making, so she needs to fit into this box.
It's impossible.
I have a reference photo. We probably won't go exactly to what she looks like in the movie, but I'll do my interpretation of her. Wow. I think I'm going to do the frontal view of her. I want it to be fairly large, so you won't see the whole turtle shell. We'll give the appearance that it's like keeps going on. So I have my Super Sculpey ready to go, all flattened out with my pasta maker. And then I have some tin foil that I'm going to roll up a ball. And this is going to be the armature for her head. I'm making eyes out of glass cabochons. I am just using a paint pen to make the pupil. And then I'm going to make with turquoise and blue paint just to kind of give it a little bit of difference of color. And then I'll add white for the rest of the eye. And this is a really fun, easy way to make eyes. And then you can bake these right in the oven because they're made out of glass. I'm also using a piece of Super Sculpey just to hold them in place while I paint the eyes. So now I'm just using some Bacon Bond to add some clay to the tinfoil. The Bacon Bond helps the clay adhere to the tinfoil. And I'm making spots for the cabochons. And then I'm going to, again, add some more Bacon Bond and then add these eyes to the clay. I'm doing this first because I feel like her eyes are a big feature and I want to work around the eyes. So if I have the eyes right, then the rest of the piece will all come together. And now I'm just shaping her eyes around the eyelids. It looks a little funky at first. I'm just adding a little bit of clay at a time.
E.T. phone home.
She looks so much like E.T. at this point.
Not that it matters, but yes.
Just adding little wormy dailies, as North of the Border likes to say, here and there just to get her different features, wrinkles and crevices and all her little lines that give her the expression. This pink color clay that I'm adding is Super Sculpey Living Doll. I just changed up the clay because this clay is very smooth to work with, or soft. It's very easy to work with for facial features, so I'm just kind of adding a little bit here and there. The other clay is a medium clay, so it's a little harder and crumbles a bit more. I like how the Living Doll clay blends. Oh my god. Hilarious. Oh. All right, let's see if I can. That's so funny. Okay. Okay. Woo. I'm just using a variety of clay tools and this old toothbrush of my son's. Toothbrushes are a great tool for adding texture. I'm just gonna paint this guy just because I want to see what it looks like all one color and see if I need to add any more spots of clay. And then I can add clay over the paint if I need it. So this is just kind of like the primer. Next, I'm going to start dry brushing. Dry brushing is a very little amount of paint on your brush. You can even put paint on your brush and then wipe most of it off and then start dry brushing. Dry brushing is a sculptor's best friend when it comes to painting. It just brings out all the details that you sculpted in the clay. It's my favorite thing to do. So now that I brought out some of the details, I like the way he's looking. So his nose is a little too pointy for me, so I want to kind of flatten it here a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little more clay. And this won't hurt the paint any when I bake it again. I can always paint over, and it actually usually always keeps its color anyways. But I'm going to add a little bit more clay. So I added a little bit more to her face, just because I wanted her nose a little wider with a little bit more wrinkle in it. And I added a little bit, probably won't see this in the diorama, but a little more wrinkles to her back of her head. And she's going to be looking out like this in the diorama. Let's get to some more painting. Just going back and forth with different colors until I get like the overall look I like. Just layering. I think I need to get some dark in here, and then I'll go back over, just trying to get it in the crevices. So when I go back over with the dry brushing, upper features will pop out. I feel like she's missing some tones, maybe some pink undertones. So I'm gonna add some of this, and I can always go over it. I'm going to let her dry a bit, and then I'm going to work on the rest of her, and then I'm going to go back in and touch up anything I need for her face. So put it aside. So right now we're just getting a placement, and I want to see what it's going to look like when I put the top on, because I don't want to take away from how we're going to see her. Blue. Let me show you. I'm going to use my dirty paint water. I want to lock some things in place. This is going to look really crazy to you, but we're going to glue. I'm just adding a little of this air drying clay to get her neck in the right spot. The paper towel, as it dries, she might sag a little bit. So this is a little stiff, and it will dry and keep a solid form. First layer is fairly dry. I added a few drill holes for future lights, and then I had to reclamp because when I was messing around with the drill holes, the seal wasn't great. So I'm gonna bulk out Morla a little bit for her shell mountain. I want the mountain to be pretty tall, probably layers of mud. She has all kinds of growth on top of her, so this was basically just to get her glued in place. She's not moving around at all anymore. Before I get started on the bulk, I'm just gonna kind of work the background a little bit, just to, I'm not one that goes in, I kind of go all over the place when I'm crafting. So this is the Swamps of Sadness. We want to make it all kind of gray. This is probably something I could have done before I put her there, but we just work with it. That's the height I want for her. Now I'm going to do some more paper mache. I am sculpting the area of her shell where it meets her neck. I am just using paper towel and glue and water to do this part of the sculpt. It's light, and once it dries and hardens, it won't go anywhere. I'm going to add a base black coat to her whole shell. While she's drying, I want to work on some trees. To make these swamp trees, I'm going to use varying widths or gauges of wire, just because branches have different widths, and I like the trees to have you know, some skinny branches, some bigger branches. This is just how I do it. You can use all the same gauge if you like. And then I basically just twist the wire together using some pliers. I could use a drill, but I want these to be kind of wonky shape because these are going to be the Swamps of Sadness trees. So they need to look a little bit unraveled and whatnot. So I am making 2 trees at once here by doing a super long length. And then I cut it in half, and then I'm just twisting it together to form the base or the trunk of the tree. And then I'm going to spread out the branches however I want, trim them as needed, and then we will move on to the next step. So to add some texture to these little trees, you're going to want to rip up a little bit of tissue paper into little pieces. Make sure you have clean hands first. Mine are dirty, but they're dry. If your hands are wet, the tissue paper is going to stick to your hands. Then you take your little tree and use a plier or tweezer to hold your wire tree. Then you're going to saturate your wire tree with a mixture of glue, water, and the color paint that you want. Next, take your paintbrush to pick up a teeny piece of tissue paper, and then you're going to place that over your wire tree. Let it sit there for a second because this helps it kind of adhere to the wire tree, and then slowly use your paintbrush to wrap the tissue around the wire. And then you're just going to continue doing this until you get your desired look. I want to start to add his mud mixture. Dirty paint water, brown paint, glue, and darken it up a little bit. Now it's going to be too dark. Looks like a good muddy color. We're just going to let her sit overnight to let this mud harden. And then go from there. This area is going to be where it's on top of the hill part. I just want to kind of see if I want to make it a little bit rounder. I don't want to go overboard because I want you to be able to see it. And since this diorama, I'm limited for space because of how I'm doing the diorama. There's not going to be much of it you see. The turtle's much bigger probably in the movie, but we're going to go for this size just so we can get the whole idea of the diorama. You can't have too much mud in this scene. Mud everywhere. Now we're going to go back to working on her. She needs a little more color around her face.
We don't even care whether or not we care.
I want Morla to have some lights. Even though it's a Swamps of Sadness, it's a dark place, I still feel like there needs to be some lights in the diorama to brighten things up a bit. So I'm going to add some fairy lights. These are my go-to right now. One day I will figure out how to solder, be a little bit more fancier. But for now, these little lights work perfectly for what I want. These won't be very bright lights. I just want to glow. So I'm going to add a little glue to each of the lights just to diffuse it a little bit. Alexa, turn off basement lights. So here are some of those trees I made earlier. They are perfect for what I need. I want to just add a little bit more character to them. I'm just going to add a little bit of dry brushing to bring out some of those details. See, they're cool because they're wires. I can still bend them where I want. So I'm working a little bit out of order just because usually this part you probably would do last. I don't do things in order. So I'm adding a layer of PVA glue. I've got my grass applicator, static grass applicator. I have some kind of like old grass, I guess you'd call it. Adding a little Spanish moss to the scenery. So off camera, I made this teeny tiny Atreyu. I made him with wire and tissue paper, just like I made the trees. And I thought I'd put him in this little tree here. I think it gives a good scale of how big Morla is compared to Atreyu. So I wanted to add a little figure in the diorama as well. Now I'm just going to add a little more foliage to Morla's turtle shell in the foreground. So I kind of like the idea of like fog rolling in, so I'm taking some cotton batting and putting some little pieces here and there. We have some fog. We have Atreyu in the branches. I'm going to go ahead and add the cover now, and then any finishing touches I'm going to do next. Pretty happy with her. If there's anything you guys think I need to add, because this is an ongoing diorama project, I can always add more, but I'm going to add some gloss a little bit here and there just to give it some shine because we're in a wet area. And then I think I'm going to call it. And here she is. Here is Morla the Ancient One. She is going to go on the bottom right of my diorama, and then Atreyu and his horse are going to go here. And then I think this side of my giant diorama will be complete. This will be one half of my book. So I'm so excited. I feel like I'm learning tricks as I go. She was so much fun to sculpt. I loved sculpting her head. I even made a little tiny Atreyu right there. I really appreciate any ideas you all have. So please let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for this, please. Anything I previously made that I can add to, or for the future scenes. There's a whole other side of this book I'm going to be making. Thanks for watching, everybody, and please check out the final results.
Are you Morla, the Ancient One?
Not that it matters, but yes.